In a division made in the bow, under deck, was deposited 10 kegs of good powder, and as much lead as we considered proportionate, 1/10 ready molded in rifle bullets. We had also stowed away here a small brass cannon and carriage, dismounted and taken to pieces, so as to lie in a little compass, thinking that such means of defense might possibly come into play at some period of our expedition. This cannon was one of the 3 which had been brought down the Missouri by the Spaniards 2 years previously, and lost overboard from a pirogue some miles above Petit Côte. A sandbar had so far altered the channel at the place where the canoe capsized that an Indian discovered one of the guns and procured its assistance to carry it down to the settlement, where he sold it for a gallon of whiskey. The people at Petit Côte then went up and procured the other 2. They were very small guns, but of good metal and beautiful workmanship, being carved and ornamented with serpents like some of the French field pieces. 50 iron balls were found with the guns, and these we procured. I mention the way in which we obtained this cannon because it performed an important part of some of our operations. It will be found hereafter. Besides it, we had 15 spare rifles boxed up and deposited forward with the other heavy goods. We put the weight here to sink our bows well in the water, which is the best method, on account of the snags and sawyers in the river. In the way of the other arms, we were sufficiently provided, each man having a stout hatchet and knife, besides his ordinary rifle and ammunition. Each boat was provided with a camp kettle, 3 large axes, a towing line, 2 oilcloths to cover the goods when necessary, and 2 large sponges for bailing. The pirogue had also a small mast and sail, which I omitted to mention, and carried a quantity of gum, birch bark, and matape to make repairs with. She also had in charge all the Indian goods which we had thought necessary to bring with us, and which we had purchased from the Mississippi boat. It was not our design to trade with the Indians, but these goods were offered to us at a low rate, and we thought it better than to take them, as they might prove of service. They consisted of silk and cotton handkerchiefs, thread, lines, and twine, hats and shoes and hose, small cutlery and ironmongery, calicoes and printing cottons, Manchester goods, twist and carrot tobacco, milled blankets, and glass toys, beads, etc., etc. All these were done up in small packages, 3 of which were a man's load. The provisions were also put up so as to be easily handled, and a part was deposited in each boat. We had altogether 200 weight of pork, 600 weight of biscuit, and 600 weight of pemmican. This we had made at Petit Côte by the Canadians, who told us that it was used by the Northwest Fur Company in all their long voyages, when it is feared that game may not prove abundant. It is manufactured in a similar manner. The lean parts of the flesh were cut of the larger animals is cut into thin slices and placed on a wooden grate over a slow fire, or exposed to the sun, as ours was, or sometimes to the frost. When it is sufficiently dried in this way, it is pounded between 2 heavy stones, and will then keep for years. If, however, much of it is kept together, it ferments upon the breaking up of the frost in the spring, and if not well exposed to the air, soon decays. The inside fat, with that of the rump, is melted down and mixed in the boiling state. With the pounded meat half and half, it is then squeezed into bags, and cooking being very palpable without salt or vegetables. The best pemmican is made with the addition of marrow, and dried berries is a capital article of food. Editor's footnote. The pemmican here described by Mr. Rodman is altogether new to us, and it is very different from that which our readers have no doubt been familiarized in the journals of Perry, Ross, Back, and other northern voyages. This, if we remember, was prepared by long continued boiling of the lean meat, carefully excluding fat, until the soup was reduced to a very small proportion of its original bulk and assumed a pulpy consistency. To this residue many spices and much salt were added, and great nutriment was supposed to have been contained in little bulk. The positive experience of an American surgeon, however, who had an opportunity of witnessing and experimenting upon the digestive process through an open wound in the stomach of a patient, has demonstrated that bulk is, in itself, an essential in this process, and that consequently, the condensation of the nutritive property of food involves in great measure a paradox. Our whiskey was in carboys of 5 gallons each, and we had 20 of these, 100 gallons in all. When everything was well on board with our whole company, including Thornton's dog, we found that there was but little room to spare except in the big cabin, which we wished to preserve free of goods, as a sleeping place in bad weather. We had nothing in here except arms and ammunition, with some beaver traps and a carpet of bearskins. Our crowded state suggested an expedient which ought to have been adopted at all events, that of detaching 4 hunters from the party, to course along the river banks and keep us in game, as well as to act in capacity of scouts, to warn us of the approach of Indians. With this object, we procured 2 good horses, giving one of them in charge to Robert and Meredith Greeley, who were to keep upon the south bank, and the other in charge of Frank and Poindexter Greeley, who were to course along the north side. By means of the horses they could bring in what game was shot. This arrangement relieved in our boats very considerably, lessening our number to 11. In the small boat were 2 men from Petit Côte, with Toby and Pierre Junot. In the larger one were the prophet, as we called him, or Alexander Wormley, John Greeley, Andrew Thornton, 3 of the Petit Côte men, and myself with Thornton's dog. Our mode of proceeding was sometimes with oars, but not generally. We most frequently pulled ourselves along by the limbs of trees on the shores, or where the ground permitted it, we used a tow line, which is the easiest way, some of us being on shore to haul, while some remained on board to set the boat offshore with poles. Very often we pulled together. In this method, which is a good one when the bottom is not too muddy or full of quicksands, and when the depth of water is not too great, the Canadians are very expert as well as at rowing. They use long, stiff, and light poles pointed with iron. With these they proceed to the bow of the boat. An equal number of men at each side. The faces then turn to the stern, and the pole inserted in the river, Reaching the bottom, a firm hold being thus taken, the boatmen apply to the heads of the poles to the shoulder, which is protected by a cushion, and pushing in this manner, while they walk along the gunwale, the boat is urged forward with great force. There is no necessity for any steersman while using the pole, for the poles direct the vessel with wonderful accuracy. In these various modes of getting along, now and then varied with the necessity of waiting and dragging their vessels by hand in rapid currents or through shallow water, we commenced our eventful voyage up the Missouri River. The skins which were considered in the leading objects of the expedition were to be obtained, principally by hunting and trapping, as privately as possible, and without direct trade with the Indians, whom we had long learned to know as in the main a treacherous race, not to be dealt with safely in so small a party as ours. The furs usually collected by previous adventurers upon our contemplated route included beaver, otter, marten, lynx, mink, musquash, bear, fox, kit fox, wolverine, raccoon, fisher, wolf, buffalo, deer, and elk. But we proposed to confine ourselves to the more costly kinds. The morning on which we set out from Petit Côté was one of the most inspiring and delicious, if nothing could exceed the hilarity of our whole party. The summer had hardly yet commenced, and the wind, which blew a strong breeze against us, at first starting, had all the voluptuous softness of spring. The sun shone clearly, but with no great heat. The ice had disappeared from the river, and the current, which was pretty full, concealed all those marshy and ragged alluvia which disfigure the borders of the Missouri at low water. It had now the most majestic appearance, washing up among the willows and cottonwood on one side, and rushing with a bold volume by the sharp cliffs on the other. As I looked up at the stream, which here stretched away to the westward until the waters apparently met the sky in the great distance, and reflected on the immensity of the territory through which those waters had probably passed, a territory as yet altogether unknown to white people, and perhaps abounding in the most magnificent works of God. I felt an excitement of soul such as I had never before experienced, and secretly resolved that it should be no slight obstacle which should prevent my pushing up this noble river farther than any previous adventure I had done. At that moment I seemed possessed of an energy more than human, and my animal spirits rose to so high a degree that I could with difficulty content myself in the narrow limits of the boat. I longed to be with the Greeleys on the bank, that I might give full vent to the feelings which inspired me by leaping and running in the prairie. In these feelings Thornton participated strongly, evincing a deep interest in our expedition and an admiration of the beautiful scenery around us, which rendered him from that moment a particular favorite with myself. I never at any period of my life felt so keenly as I then did the want of some friend whom I could converse freely and without danger of being misunderstood. The sudden loss of all my relatives by death had saddened but not depressed my spirits, which appeared to seek relief in the contemplation of the wild scenes of nature. And these scenes, and the reflections which they encouraged, could not, I found, be thoroughly enjoyed without the society of some one person's reciprocal sentiments.